Hello everyone, welcome to this course on Introduction to Programming. So this is a compulsory course for all of you, and I know that there are students from both CSE as well as non-CSE background. Now let's look at an outline of today's session. We'll first look at what is programming, then why it is important to learn programming, and also how to learn programming. So I hope that this session gives you enough motivation to actively learn this course and also give you excitement about your journey into programming. Okay, so let's get started. So whenever we hear about programming, the first thing that comes into our mind is all about computers, right? Obviously. So computers have become a part and parcel of our life these days. So if not using directly, we use some service associated with computer systems, right? So be it the web search engines or the various social media platforms, then we have various websites, video, then image sharing platforms, etc., right? So to give a simple definition, a computer is nothing but a system that takes some input, performs some processing and produces some output, right? Now what is a program? A program is nothing but a set of instructions that are given to the computer to perform some task, right? So it takes the input and does some processing, right? So this processing is actually represented, or it is specified in terms of a program. Okay. And then coming to programming language. So programming language is nothing but a language that is used to specify these instructions. Okay, so we have some instructions and they have to be specified to the computer, right? They have to be conveyed to the computer, and so a programming language is used to represent or to convey these instructions to the computer. Now there are different programming languages, and each programming language has a set of rules. Okay, so you have to write the instructions based on the rules of the programming language that we are using. Okay. Now let's look at programming as an analogy with cooking. Okay, so in cooking, what do? We have some ingredients taken in some specific quantity. Then we do some processing, and finally, tada! We have our dish prepared. So in the context of programming, what we do is we have some input, we do some processing, and finally, we have the output. Okay, so now, how do we specify the processing that is to be done in the case of cooking? We have a recipe, right? So in the recipe it is specified what are the ingredients that are to be taken, what is the quantity, etc., and it also specifies the instructions, right? What are the processing that is to be done on these ingredients in order to finally prepare the dish, right? So recipe is nothing, it consists of a set of instructions for preparing a particular dish. And now if you look at it, there are some, okay, I'm kind of simplifying things a little bit, but you can see that there are some specific set of instructions that you will see recurring within a recipe. So for example, you can see, right, mix some ingredients, apple, sugar are ingredients, then add again some ingredients, then mix, right, bake. So all these are some processing, right? And if you take any recipe, then you will see that, okay, so these steps actually involves some order or some mix of these instructions, right? So maybe I can use a common format to represent these. So for example, if I am teaching a system to cook, okay, and this system only knows how to interpret these instructions. So if I tell it to add ingredient quantity, then it will add the ingredient of the specified quantity. Then if I tell the system to mix ingredients, then ingredients means whatever the ingredients, the names which we are specifying, then it does a mix of that, like that. So we have all these instructions associated with the recipe now represented in a common format. Okay, so programming language can be considered in a similar sense, that is, it is a means to represent the instructions in a recipe, Okay, you can think of it. So there is a format, right? So you can think of the instructions in a recipe to be conveyed to the system. We are writing it in some format. Now, as I already told you, different languages make use of different constraints or different formats. But the basic recipe is the same, algorithm, right? Whatever the processing we are doing is still the same. But it is just that the way it is represented is different. So here you can see, so this could be like one format of representing the recipe, and this could be another format of representing the same recipe. Okay, so basically the processing is the same, just the way that these instructions are written or represented is what is differing here. Okay, now we will look at the questions that we first raised, right, in the beginning. So what is programming? So it is nothing but the process of creating a set of instructions to perform a task. Okay, but then again we use a programming language to represent it, to write down these instructions, right? So if you want to learn programming, then definitely you have to learn the rules of the programming language. Only then can you write the instructions in that language, right? But programming is not only about learning the rules of a programming language. Then you have to also develop the knack of coming up with the right processing, right? So to talk in the context of cooking, right? So you can specify those instructions in the format specified, but you should also know the steps to prepare the dish, right? So if you don't know the steps in the first place, then whatever instructions you write, you will not get the correct dish. Instead of paneer butter masala, you will end up with a different dish, right? So you need both the instructions as well as the rules to represent the instructions, right? So just because you have memorized or you have learned the rules, that doesn't mean that you are proficient in programming. You have to also develop that sense or that knack of coming up with the right solution or with the right instruction set. Now coming to the next question, why learn programming? Okay, the most obvious answer is it finds application in almost all domains these days. So even if you are from a non-CS background, right, or non-CS domain, again, even in civil, mechanical, so everywhere you do lots of simulations. So to run simulations and all, you need to actually code, right? What exactly you have to simulate, you have to do some coding, right? So again, this programming, whatever you are learning, will help you. So again, you will be learning one programming language here, but if you get the knack of programming, then it is very easy to learn another programming language. Why? Because see, we looked at the recipe, right? So the the method to prepare the dish is always the same, but it can be represented in different formats, right? That's all. So similarly, once you get the knack of using one programming language, it's very easy to learn another programming language. And also, even from science background, today, in physics, basically physicists, biologists and all, they also use coding to perform lots of data processing and analysis, etc. And then it develops structured and creative thinking. So like I said, you have to first come up with the method to prepare a dish, right? So only then can you write it in some format as specified by the language. So it helps you to develop logical thinking and creative thinking. Why? Because you have to define every step clearly, right? You cannot take anything for granted. So what you have to add, as in the case of a recipe, what you have to add, at which point you have to add, right? So similarly, in the case of a program also, you have to specify everything clearly. So that helps you to develop a structured thinking capacity, and it also helps you to analyze and improve solutions. How is that possible? Let's see with an example. So let's imagine that you have been given with the task of sorting answer sheets alphabetically. So once the exam gets over, you collect all the answer sheets, right? So then it's not sorted in any order, but you have been asked to do some sorting here. So there are different techniques, right? So maybe one person, what he can do is like, so there are all these unsorted papers. what he can do is he can put A, B, C papers together. He can go through this pile once and then D, E, F, G together and so on. And then he can sort this pile separately, then this pile separately, and then he can combine everything. So now the whole thing would be sorted, right? What is another technique to do the same thing? So you can take the first paper, then take the second paper and see if it comes before or after the first paper and place it accordingly. Then you take the third paper, then check with the last paper in the sorted pile, and then keep on comparing and get it placed at the correct position and so on. So when you have a small pile of papers, let's say some 40, 50 and all, these algorithms does not seem to make any difference, right? In terms of efficiency or the time taken. But what happens when you have a very large pile of sheets, okay, or let's say you have to sort so many records, and you want the system to do this task. How will you come up with the right algorithm or right instruction set in that case? So there you have to analyze the efficiency, right? Okay, is this one better or is this one better in terms of the time taken? So now when you do programming, right, when you write the steps, when you come up with the algorithm, then it becomes easier for you to analyze different techniques. So that also is exciting, right? Now the last question, how to learn programming? Okay, so you have to obviously learn the programming language rules or the syntax. There is no escape from that. And then you have to do practice and lots of practice. You have to get your hands dirty, with lots of coding, and then only you develop that knack, to come up with correct solutions or programs. Okay, so now let's get started with our journey into programming.